Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we got some really interesting information coming out of MagicCon, and it's turning some heads because it looks like Magic the Gathering is going to be collaborating with PlayStation to bring us a bunch of PlayStation-themed Magic the Gathering cards that are themed around characters from the PlayStation universe. And these are all unique cards. These are not, older cards that are reprinted that have like a new look to them that look like PlayStation characters. These are functionally unique cards representing characters from PlayStation, and a bunch of them look really, really interesting. So we are going to dive in, go over every single card that's been spoiled so far. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. If you're not new to the channel, please give it a like. It helps me get the video out to more people. It helps the channel grow, and I honestly appreciate it more than you will ever know. But with all of that out of the way, let's dive in and check out these Magic the Gathering PlayStation collaboration cards. First off, we have Jin Sakai, Ghost of Tsushima. This is the main character from Ghost of Tsushima. Obviously, the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima is about to launch any day now, Ghost of Yokai. So the timing couldn't be better to represent this franchise. Jin Sakai is a 2/4 legendary human samurai for 4 mana in the colors of Esper. And whenever Jin Sakai deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So already off to a really good start, but then it gets super crazy. Whenever a creature you control attacks a player, if no other creatures are attacking that player, choose one. You can either trigger Standoff, and that creature gains double strike until end of turn, or you can trigger Ghost, and it can't be blocked this turn. A couple of interesting things to note about this. First of all, it works for any creature. Jin himself doesn't have to be attacking, right? As long as you have him on the battlefield, anything that's attacking can trigger a Standoff or Ghost, and you can choose one of those. Basically, for each creature that's attacking a different player. And that's the other part of this card that gets really interesting, because obviously this card gets a lot better in multiplayer formats like Commander, where you can have one creature attacking each player, and each of those creatures can trigger Standoff or Ghost. And if one of those creatures is Jin Sakai himself, then when you deal damage unblocked because of Ghost, you get to draw a card. Or if you think you can get through without them blocking and you don't need the Ghost, you choose the Standoff and give double strike, and then Jin Sakai's hitting that opponent twice, which means you're actually going to get to draw 2 cards off of that. So some really interesting ways that he combos with himself, some really interesting ways that he's even better for multiplayer formats like Commander. And overall, I just think he's a really interesting, really cool card. So I'm pretty excited about this one. But next up, we've got Aloy, Savior of Meridian. This is the main character from the Horizon franchise, featuring Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Forbidden West was the second entry in the series. This is a 3/5 legendary human warrior with vigilance and reach for 5 mana in the colors of Simic. And she has the In You All Things Are Possible ability, which means whenever one or more artifact creatures you control attack, you get to discover X, where X is the greatest power among them. So she definitely wants to go into an artifact deck or be the commander of a very artifact-centric deck. You want to swing with a huge artifact creature with huge power, and then you get to discover for a huge amount equal to X, which is going to absolutely be insane. It's also worth noting that it's whenever they attack, right? Whenever one or more artifact creatures you control attack. So you don't have to deal combat damage to get this. You get to discover right away before your opponent even gets to declare blockers. And since Aloy herself has vigilance, if you can find some way to turn her into an artifact creature, Mycosynth or something like that, she could trigger her own ability maybe. You could discover 3 and still have a blocker. That's kind of an out there idea. I don't think that's going to line up most of the time, but there are some really interesting ways to use Aloy for sure. Just capitalizing on an insane amount of power coming in the form of artifact creatures. Discover X is going to be super powerful. Even if you can't play the thing that you hit, Discover lets you put it into your hand. So I think this is really cool thematically and actually pretty relevant as far as the power level. Next up, we've got Ellie Brickmaster, representing The Last of Us Part 1, not Part 2. This is Ellie from The Last of Us Part 1. She is a 2/1 legendary human survivor for 1 red and 1, and she has the Distract the Horde ability. So whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, that attacking player creates a tapped 1/1 black fungus zombie creature token named Cordyceps Infected that's attacking that opponent. So obviously it's better if you're attacking because you get the 1/1 token. But even if players are attacking each other, they get to create 1/1 tokens that are attacking each other, and they all kill each other quicker, which is kind of cool. You can also maybe synergize this with certain token synergies or sacrifice or aristocrat style decks where you can use the tokens that you're creating to get more value. So there's some pretty interesting stuff you can do. It's also worth pointing out that that Cordyceps token is a zombie. So potentially you could be in zombie tribal and start to build up these tokens and get buffs to your zombies, which could be really interesting. But the most interesting part about this card is the other line of text that says it has partner survivors. This means that any card that also has partner survivors can be paired with this so that you can have 2 commanders at the same time, as long as both of them are partner survivors. Now, this is a little bit different from the way the partner mechanic has been used in the past, where it partners with a very specific card, and that's because they're trying to leave the door open to allow this to partner with not only the one card they have in mind that kind of comes with this card as a pair, but also potential cards down the line that are like new iterations of the same character that you can then start to mix and match with this partner mechanic. So having it be like partner and then a keyword to say who you can partner with instead of the card name does open up a little bit of interesting design space. Ellie herself being the Brickmaster is actually really funny because my son, I swear to God, he made it through that entire game with only a brick. He always had a brick in his hand. He was always out of ammo every single time I took a look at his screen, and somehow he still beat that game, which is kind of hilarious. Me, I conserve ammo all the time. I hoard everything, so I always make it to the end of the game with like way more than you ever would use. But I digress. Let's move on. The next card that pairs with Ellie Brickmaster is Joel, Resolute Survivor, also from The Last of Us Part 1. He is a 4/4 legendary human survivor with Menace for 5 mana in the colors of Golgari. Again, he has partner survivors, so you can run both Joel and Ellie as your commanders together if you want. And whenever a creature token dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Joel and draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So kind of interesting, if Ellie is spitting out creature tokens, if you're then in some kind of a sacrifice deck, whenever you sacrifice one of your Cordyceps token, your Joel is going to get bigger and draw you a card. But it gets even more interesting if you're running this in Commander, especially if you're running the pair in Commander, because as your opponents attack each other and create these Cordyceps tokens that are also attacking each other, they're all dying in combat by things that are blocking them, and then they're triggering Joel so that he can get a +1/+1 counter and draw a card. So potentially during each other player's turn, when they attack and make one of these 1/1 tokens and it inevitably dies, you get to get a counter and draw a card. So getting an extra counter and drawing an extra card during every player's turn gets kind of crazy, and pairing this with Ellie the Brickmaster, what was her name? Yeah, it was Brickmaster, is a really interesting synergy that works way better than you might initially think when you start to really take into account how those cards end up lining up together. So pretty cool pair, but The Last of Us Part 1 is not the only Last of Us game being represented in this collaboration. We have Ellie, Vengeful Hunter, from The Last of Us Part 2, where she's a little bit older and a little bit more of a murderous psychopath. She is a 3/1 legendary human survivor for 3 mana in the colors of Rakdos, and she has the ability to pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature. Ellie deals 2 damage to target player and gains Indestructible until end of turn. So here you have a sacrifice outlet where whatever tokens you're making, the Cordyceps tokens that you're making with younger Ellie, you can then sacrifice to older Ellie to hit your opponent for damage, get Indestructible to survive combat yourself, or to survive removal coming at her, or whatever the case may be. Either way, you're incidentally building up these Cordyceps tokens on your side. and getting to save them up for sacrifice fodder to do damage and to keep Ellie Vengeful Hunter alive, which is kind of interesting. She could be really good in like a sacrifice or aristocrat style deck, but the most notable thing to point out here, and the first time that Magic has done this, is she also has partner survivors. She's meant to be paired with another commander that's coming representing The Last of Us Part 2 that we'll get to next. But because they made these partner mechanics around the survivors keyword, they're able to make all 4 The Last of Us cards able to be mixed and matched however you want, to choose 2 to be your commanders, and maybe the other 2 are just in the deck somewhere. Or maybe you only want to run 2 specific ones, but I think being able to have certain combinations as your commander does make it really, really interesting. And that brings us to the last card representing The Last of Us, another card representing The Last of Us Part 2, which a lot of you might have probably guessed by now, and that is Abby, Merciless Soldier. And honestly, I think this is the most interesting one of the bunch as far as power level. She is a 4/4 legendary human survivor for 3 mana in the colors of Gruul. And she also has partner survivors. Super interesting that you can combo any of the 4 with any other of the 4. When you cast this spell, create a number of 1/1 black fungus zombie creature tokens named Cordyceps Infected equal to the amount of mana spent to cast it. And because every time your commander dies, it gets the commander tax and comes back costing an extra 2 mana, that means that the first time you play this, you're going to get 3 1/1s. The next time you play it, it's going to cost 5. You're going to get 5 1/1s, and then 7 1/1s, and then 9 1/1s. You're able to keep replaying this and creating a ton of 1/1s. In fact, the other line of text says Abby enters under the control of an opponent of your choice. So, first of all, flavor-wise, this is perfect. She's the antagonist. You want to kill her. But at the end of the day, she's also providing you value and creating all of these 1/1s. And thematically, it kind of fits into the theme of revenge in The Last of Us Part 2, which is really cool, that you're giving this to your opponent and then trying your hardest to kill it, because you want it to go back into your command zone so that you can replay it and get even more Cordyceps. Really, really interesting design space there, just from a flavor perspective. But as far as the power level, that's where things get really interesting, because you just keep making tons of 1/1s. Eventually, throughout the course of the game, this can make you a ton of tokens, especially if you have ways to kill Abby as soon as you drop her, which obviously you're going to want to do all the time. Just keep killing Abby. It feels just like you're playing The Last of Us Part 2, at least the first half of the game, and you just always want her to die. And that makes sense. I think it's really cool, and getting a ton of these zombie Cordyceps Infected tokens every time you replay her more and more and more just fits perfectly, not only with the other synergies that we've seen in the rest of the Last of Us cards, but also just really good in any kind of sacrifice or aristocrat style deck. You're going to be able to go super wide with a ton of tokens and have a ton of sacrifice fodder. Rottenmouth Viper is going to love this card, and I just think it's really cool. But next up, we have, of course, Uncharted represented. If they're going to represent The Last of Us, they are going to represent Uncharted, but we've only gotten one card shown off from Uncharted, and that's Nathan Drake Treasure Hunter, a 3/2 legendary human rogue for 3 mana in the colors of Grixis. He has First Strike, so a 3/2 First Strike for 3, already not too bad. And you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast spells you don't own or to activate abilities of permanents you control but don't own. Why is that relevant? Because whenever Nathan Drake attacks, you exile the top card of each player's library, and you may cast a spell from among those cards. This is perfect flavor-wise, because Nathan Drake is a treasure hunter. He's constantly hunting down these relics that he can sell for money. He's trying to steal what isn't his, but really it isn't anybody's anymore, right? It's lost, it's buried. It belongs to an ancient civilization, but I think that the mechanics on the card really do a great job representing that, being able to just take cards from the tops of players' library and play them no matter what the color is. Feels really cool. Plus that first line of text allowing you to play anything that you don't own use abilities of things you control but don't own, or cast spells that you don't own, use mana of any color. Sometimes that ends up being relevant if you pair it with other cards that are allowing you to cast things of your opponents that don't necessarily give you that extra ability to smooth things over and cast things regardless of color. So some really interesting stuff going on here for sure, but let's move on. Next up, we've got, of course, God of War being represented on a Magic card. Kind of crazy. We have two cards from specifically from the newer 2018 God of War, aka God of War Ragnarok, those two iterations, and not necessarily the Greek trilogy from the past. The first card here is Kratos Stoic Father, a 4/4 legendary god warrior for 4 mana in the colors of Boros. And whenever you attack with one or more gods, and whenever a god dies, you get an experience counter. This is really interesting because not only can this pair with the other card that we're going to see from God of War, but it pairs with any cards that give you experience counters. And if you guys have been keeping up with all of my spoilers, we did go over some Avatar: The Last Airbender spoilers, where there are a couple of cards in there that give you experience counters under certain situations, under certain circumstances, and then get value off those experience counters. So being able to pair Kratos with those cards as well is also another line that you could utilize, which seems kind of interesting. Also, at the beginning of your end step, you put a number of +1/+1 counters on target creature equal to the number of experience counters you have. So the more you attack or kill your own gods or just lose them in combat, sacrifice them, whatever the case may be, the more experience counters you get. And every single turn at the end of your turn, for all of those experience counters, you're going to get to dump a bunch of counters on one of your cards. A bunch of +1/+1 counters on one of your creatures. So that's pretty interesting. It gives you a way to build up experience. It also gives you a way to capitalize on that experience by dumping a bunch of counters on things specifically. And it makes sense, right? Because he's killing gods and becoming more powerful. That just makes total sense. He also has partner, father, and son. And this is another good example of how they're using like a keyword mechanic now instead of a card name to open up the possibility of being able to partner with more things down the line. But that brings us to our next God of War card, which also has partner, father, and son, and that is Atreus, Impulsive Son, a 2/4 legendary god archer for 3 mana in the colors of Izzet. It has reach, and he also has the ability to pay 3 mana, tap, draw a card for each experience counter you have, and then discard a card. Atreus deals 2 damage to each opponent. So what's interesting about this ability is the fact that Atreus doesn't actually have any way to gain experience counters, only to utilize them, which is interesting because from a flavor perspective, that represents the fact that like his father is teaching him how to be a warrior, which is interesting because his father is building up these experience counters, killing gods, or just attacking as a god or whatever, and then Atreus is able to take those experience counters and turn them into value, turn them into card draw. And that flavor representing that father-son dynamic is pretty spot on, and I think it's interesting. From a power level, I do feel like Atreus is a little bit weaker because he has no ways to build up experience counters himself, and I think this is the only experience counter we've seen in recent memory that hasn't had a way, experience counter card that hasn't had a way to build up its own experience counters. But again, I think the flavor makes it super interesting, and the fact that he also is listed here as having partner with father and son means you're always going to play them together, at least in Commander, you know, you're going to play them together as your commander. So you're always going to have access to one or the other. You can make sure you get, you know, Kratos out so that you can start building up experience counters to turn on Atreus, which is really, really interesting. I'm just kind of excited to see like where else they go with this partner, father, and son, because it does seem like the door is open to have more cards with partner, father, and son. Just like with the Last of Us cards, there was partner survivors and more of those. These are the only 2 partner, father, and son right now, but they're definitely doing the mechanic in a way that leaves the door open so that further down the line, or possibly even just cards they already know about that they haven't spoiled yet, are going to be able to fit into this partner, father and son dynamic and give you options for how you kind of like build out your unique commander setup, which I think is really cool. But that's going to bring us to the last card spoiled for this collaboration, which is another God of War card, Kratos, God of War. Yes, we do get a card by itself representing the Greek trilogy, which I think everybody wanted, right? It's cool that we have Kratos and Atreus from the newer PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 games, but you can't have a collaboration like this without representing the iconic original Kratos, and we have it here. And this card's kind of a doozy. A 2/3 legendary god warrior with double strike for 3 red mana. All creatures have haste. So before we get to the last ability, right off the bat, he's a 2/3 double striker with haste himself, because he doesn't say all other creatures have haste, which means he's swinging in for 4 mana, half of which is first strike, for 4 damage, half of which is first strike, for only 3 mana right out of the gate. That's already kind of nuts. But then he has this last line of text: at the beginning of each player's end step, Kratos deals damage to that player equal to the number of creatures that player controls that didn't attack this turn, punishing anything that's not partaking in the war, thus the God of War. It makes a lot of thematic sense, and the card's just super powerful, man. Like, players are going to take damage no matter what, just all the time, especially if you end up using this in Commander, right? And you've got a bunch of different players around the table. At the end of every single one of their turns, they're going to take damage if they're not attacking with things, which means everyone's incentivized to attack each other with everything to avoid damage from Kratos, and nobody's leaving behind blockers, and everybody's killing each other super fast, which makes a ton of sense for a God of War, right? You slam this on the board, and all of a sudden, it's like a frenzy. It's like a bloodlust. Everyone's just throwing everything at each other because they're incentivized to do so. Nobody wants to take extra damage from holding back blockers. All of it just seems crazy. The other part that's worth pointing out about this card, to circle back around to that all creatures have haste ability, it's not just all creatures you control have haste. Literally, all creatures have haste. All of your opponent's creatures have haste, which just makes this guy insane. It is literally sheer chaos as soon as he hits the board. Everyone is just killing everyone. And what better way to represent the original God of War than a card that mechanically ends up incentivizing that kind of play? That just seems like a really, really great flavor win, and I kind of love it, to be completely honest. But let me know how you guys feel about the card, and that's going to do it for this video. In fact, let me know how you feel about all of the cards that we looked at today. Do you think this is a good idea, collaborating with PlayStation? Do you feel like Wizards is going a bridge too far with all of these Universes Beyond and all of these collaborations? I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about it, because I'm really on the fence. Some of these collaborations I really love and I get really excited about, and some of them I feel like just don't fit, and I am worried we're going a little too deep on collabs. But some of these cards look awesome. Some of these characters are characters I love. I absolutely adore playing console games when I'm not playing Magic and other card games. I have a PS5, I got an Xbox Series X and a Switch 2 and all that stuff. And if I wasn't doing this kind of content, I would probably be making that kind of content, because that's how I decompress every day. When I'm done working on content, working on videos, streaming Magic, stuff like that, I relax by turning on the PS5 and losing myself in some games. So let me know how you feel about games. Let me know if you're a gamer as well and what some of your PlayStation favorites are. I love The Last of Us. I love JRPGs. I could go on forever. I love survival horror so much. Let me know how you feel. Let me know what games you like, and if you're a gamer that dabbles in both console gaming and card gaming like I do, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.